Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another forms class. Today we have 22D optional clause addendum. And actually, I think I should rename that, which you guys will figure that out in a moment here. And also the 22E FIRPTA disclosure form. So we are going to go ahead and I've already shared my screen. I'm going to hide this. All right. And we're going to dive right in. So optional clauses addendum to purchase and sale agreement. General comments. It says use. This is an optional form. And it's not optional. That should be removed from the actual manual. It is so critically important to protect ourselves in this industry. You guys know that anyone and anywhere can sue at the drop of a hat, right? Doesn't matter if they're right or wrong. They can find an attorney that would represent them and take their money and go through the process. And so it happens. Our job is to protect our clients and, of course, protect ourselves and protect the firm as much as possible. And as soon as we start reading this, it's going to make sense. So, B, do not make changes. These are attorney-prepared clauses. Washington case law permits you to fill in simple blanks in attorney-prepared forms and insert attorney-prepared clauses. If you change these clauses, they are no longer attorney-prepared. If you make changes, you will be held to the standard of an attorney in the wording of the changes. So you guys know that we have office clauses that are actually prepared inside of our transaction desk. Obviously, next transaction desk class, you'll be able to see that again. If you don't know how, especially being in this office, we use these all the time. There's a lot of attorney drafted clauses that are in there to help further protect you guys and the firm and us and our clients, obviously. So, addenda. In the purchase and sale agreement, you should insert Form 22D in the blank space for addenda. If you forget to do so, it does not make the addendum void, but it could cause problems when somebody claims this addendum was not attached to the purchase and sale agreement. How many people have ever had an issue with what this is talking about? Go ahead, Zoom people. You're gonna have to unmute. It's just me and Jason in here today. Have you ever had this come up?
I haven't.
No,
No.
not at all.
Would it be for something in the very, very bottom when you would click the bottom part and you would put your own language in there? Is that where?
No. Okay, so what they're talking about, let me jump over to our forms. And we open up Form 21. Okay, so they're talking about the addenda line, which is also known as the catalog. So if you were filling out your form, or you're the listing broker, you receive the form. And everything in this, let's say it's just those two forms. That's the only thing they've listed. But once the actual deal comes over, you see there's a Form 35, there's a 22K, there's all these other things. Have you not experienced this before?
Yes.
Okay, what was the situation? What did you do? What was it?
The inspection contingency form.
Yeah, so 35 wasn't listed on here, but yet it was included.
In there, so it is part of the contract, it's just not listed in the addendum.
It's not listed in the addenda. It's not listed in the catalog, exactly. So if you've had that situation, some brokers think, oh, since it's not listed here, that means it's not included. Not true. Absolutely not true. It says you should insert it. But if you forget to do so, it does not make the addendum void. But it could cause problems because, see, that's the part where, as a best business practice, you always should make certain that you list everything that's a part of the agreement on the addenda line or the catalog.
So if you're the listing broker and you get one that comes in, that should you clean that up after you go mutual, or is it just assumed that since like say for instance with 35R, it's in there, should you clean it up and put it on the addenda, or does it even really matter?
So, great question. I'm so glad you asked this because it's important for brokers to understand that, yes, I mean, you probably should add it. But the thing you do not need to do, which you would think most brokers, if I gave this test, they would probably 90% of them would fail. You would think, do you need initials for doing that?
No, because it's already part of the contract. You're just adding it on. It's already in the contract. So
Yeah, it's not actually changing anything on there. It's just probably more just for like clarification purposes.
Yeah. How about this one? Okay, you guys understand, and that's correct. You would not need initials. The catalog area, you really don't need to make initials there. The only time I am in favor of making initials and striking something is maybe in the event you are removing it. If you're actually removing it, and probably the most common one I'm seeing kind of brokers remove, in which maybe in the future you guys might see this even happen more often, especially with the new escalation update that's coming. The new form is going to be, I guarantee it, it's even more complicated now than it was before. Because you have to add every single credit, and now if a seller is offering compensation at all, that is a credit. And you have to add it now in the calculations. We never did before. So that's going to be a huge one. Guaranteed it's going to be throwing people off on the new form. Guaranteed.
So like if you are going to remove that, so say you get an offer in and then you just counter back, say it's like price or whatever, and you just counter back at the price, but you're not doing the escalation anymore, and you usually just put the red line through it, should you remove it off of the addenda as well?
Yeah, so that's the time where exactly where I'm saying that I'm okay with people striking that, because if you were going to counter their offer, and maybe give them the copy of the complete offer, and so you can say, hey, I don't want to mess with getting calculations wrong at all. We're going to share this other offer, okay? And we're going to counter you. And then you can strike that escalation and then strike the price, make initials for those. I'm okay with that practice. But the one that that I definitely don't like to see, and in fact, I'll ask you guys this one. Let's say that the listing broker is going to go ahead and use a Form 36. What is that? What's Form 36? Who knows?
I almost remember it. I can't think of the name.
Form 36. Bonus points. Nobody? And that's surprising because it'll be coming up and obviously in our list, because we're in the 22s right now in the catalog for forms classes. 36 is the counteroffer addendum. Okay. Our contracts were actually designed, we were supposed to be using it. Kind of like the whole form system literally was designed with that form in mind. If you're not going to accept the buyer's offer, the listing brokers should be utilizing that Form 36 right away. But it actually became this kind of according to people who've been around a long time, they said that it's just because it became a bad habit, and it just has continued in the future.
I have a question about that. So I just did an offer representing a buyer, and I did the 36, and then the buyer or the seller's broker comes back with they struck price, they struck things.
Yeah.
And then when we went mutual, their transaction coordinator wanted me to put initials on the strike throughs. And I told them we didn't need to, but they kind of went back and forth with it. So finally, I just put the initials on there just to appease them. But we don't necessarily have to, because the counter trumps everything, right?
100%.
Yeah.
So first things, why do they do that? Why did they come up with that? First of all, when you guys put in your expiration here, right? You put that in, you send it over. When you start striking stuff, when is the offer, the counter offer going to expire?
3 days,
Nope.
4 days. Oh, what is it?
By default.
It's defaults. I thought it
It's
was.
exactly the same as what if someone sent you an offer and this is totally blank? How good is that offer? Good for? Does anybody remember?
Is it 48 hours?
Nope. It's not hours. It's never going to be measured in hours. Remember computation of time?
2 days?
2 business days. If not filled in, look at how many times it'll say it. It'll go over here to offer or counteroffer expiration date. If no expiration date is specified for an offer or counteroffer, the offer or counteroffer shall expire 2 days after the counteroffer is delivered by the party making the offer or counteroffer, unless sooner withdrawn. Those are 2 business days, right? That's the other thing that's dangerous.
Yeah, with the counter, so the last transaction I did, they countered us, and so we countered their counter. They had a open house on Saturday. So I had our counter expire on Saturday at 2 o'clock when their open house started.
That's from the Form 36,
From the
though, right?
36, yeah, to
Yes.
force them to either accept our offer.
Exactly.
Or, so I didn't want them to shop my offer at an open house if somebody else keep, just me
Yeah.
probably overthinking things.
True story. Listen close because this is it could happen to you. Listing broker got a low offer. And the listing broker sellers, they countered that offer. All they did, let's say, I'm going to give you the scenario just like this so you guys can see it, you know. So they sent the offer. Their offer said it's good till tomorrow. Right? So it ends at 9 p.m. That's how long that is, right? By default, because we didn't specify a time. They countered back, and because they had only been on the market for a little bit, and the seller's like, yeah, I don't really feel like we should take a low offer. We just started and we've already got people making appointments. So let's counter, like, basically it was like 5,000 less than like full price. And this is up there. It was like, I think it was like 950 or 980, something like that. Almost $1 million. And it was almost a full price. And so the listing broker, all they did was struck the price, wrote in their price, and that was the only change they made. They sent it back to the buyer broker. Okay, they sent it back on, it was Thursday. Okay, all of this happened on the same day. Okay, Thursday. They sent it back, countered it, called the buyer broker. Buyer broker goes, yeah, my buyers, they're not gonna sign off on this. We're not gonna counter. We're done. We're actually gonna go look at some more homes this weekend. And, you know, if something doesn't work out, we'll come back. Okay, so sorry, we're not gonna do it. All of a sudden, right? So buyer broker or listing broker and seller go, okay, whatever. So all of a sudden on Saturday, they get 3 showings, 2 more offers come in. 2 more offers come in. And they ended up actually accepting an offer. Okay. They accept the offer on Saturday. It was perfect. It was like full price, waived inspection. And it was like, huge down payment. They were gonna have a appraisal waiver and everything. And it was closing in 3 weeks. So it was perfect for everyone, right? All of a sudden, guess what happened? On Sunday. Buyer number one, who received that counter, the buyer broker called and said, hey, I'm gonna be sending you the signed off accepted deal. And we're gonna go ahead and actually move forward. We're gonna accept what you guys countered. And the list broker, our list broker is like, you can't. We already accepted another offer. He goes, I already got it signed. My TC is gonna be sending it back. He goes, as soon as the buyers, they're signing it now. So as soon as they sign it and get it, you know, like we want it. So our listing broker hung up, called me and said, Eric, they said they're going to accept it. They can't do that, right? Because they told me, I'm like, and I explained to them, because when did their offer expire?
2 days after.
Yeah, Thursday was 0. Friday was
Business
1.
days. No, business days. Yeah.
That offer, their
Monday.
counter would be good till Monday at 9 p.m.
Dang.
So I told him, I said, you need to immediately get the 36-day withdrawal of offer, counter offer signed by your seller right now and send it as fast as you humanly can. It honestly was a race of time because this person would have sold their listing twice,
Right.
and that would have been a lawsuit. We got super lucky and got it in before. It came like 20 something minutes apart.
I mean, before the sign.
Before the signed counter was received, they withdrew their counter offer. So you guys be very, very careful when you're dealing with these timelines.
Well, another thing that I kind of like to do is I'll have, like, if you do a counter, you do the, at the same time.
Yes.
So then if you say, for instance, they find something else on the weekend that they want to look at, you could immediately submit your withdrawal.
Yep. Yeah, so that's a really good idea, making sure that if you have a counter or if you're going to counter, get that withdrawal of counter or counter offer addendum,
Exactly.
withdrawal signed at the same time and just save it, hold on to it. Because if they tell you, no, we're not going to move forward, boom, send it.
And with backup offers too, I do the same thing.
Oh, 100%.
Yep, just have it done at the same time.
Yep.
You don't have to track it, run it down.
Yep. So we have dealt with that 2 homes sold or 1 home sold twice to the same, you know, for different buyers. Every couple of years it comes up. Luckily, it hasn't happened here and, you know, since I've been here. But we have dealt with it on the other side. Like our buyer has been stuck. There's had one of these situations. So, yeah, not good. All right.
So I got a question for the
Yeah.
addendum line. So sometimes you miss stuff where you go under contract or you go mutual rather,
Mm-hmm.
and then you forgot the septic form. Or you find out you saw that.
So you mean you forgot to include it or
Yes.
you forgot to add it on the line?
Well, no,
it
you
was
forgot
there.
You forgot to include it at all.
Yeah, that's
And
bad.
so then you're trying to add that on after the fact.
Mhm.
Should you add that to the addendum line or is just the addendum
No.
good?
You don't have to do that because realistically, it's mainly for when you are first negotiating. Right?
Yeah.
You don't need to like go back and
Okay.
add that. No. But yeah, those types of situations do come up. We had one actually just a few months ago. Literally, our buyer broker was following what the listing said. They marked everything saying it's on sewer, and then
Septic.
the home inspector goes, "Oh, so here's the lids for your septic tank, and they're like, what? What are you talking about? And the listing broker said we didn't know. So it was a huge mess. So that type of thing, those things can happen once in a great while, but in those cases, you know, if it's on septic, you have to have the septic addendum for the county in your agreement, even if it's already been pumped. That's the one that comes up that people are, oh, it's already pumped, so we don't need it. That's untrue. The only difference in what you would be doing in the septic addendum at that point would be putting 0 days for the contingencies thing because it's done.
Yeah.
And that's only if you have actual
Yeah.
receipts
The
and
OSS,
everything, the OSS, the RSS, the O&M, or it being recorded in King County. All those counties have their own different requirements,
Which are
so.
like 3 or 4 weeks to do that in.
Yeah, it's bad. It's back way up. All right. Assistance in filling in the blanks. Obviously, the date of the purchase and sale agreement. All right. The buyer's name, seller's name, property address. So, number 5 says, check the box. Check whichever one or more of these clauses is to be part of the purchase and sale agreement. Pretty much what they mean by this is if you do not check the box, what does that mean? Zoom people?
So I know like sometimes with the appraisal, you know, square footage might not be as is, and so potentially we could also be on the hook for not checking that or something in regards to that, or if there's any special easements on the property that we weren't aware of that we didn't divulge, the seller or the buyer could come back at us, right?
Yeah, so realistically, if a box is not checked, it's as if this entire language is invisible. It's not even on the form. It means it does not apply. So in the very, very beginning of forms class of, you know, how we start in order of the forms, the first thing that they say in the manuals on the very first form is where brokers mostly make mistakes and where most lawsuits come from are from missing items, not checking a box or not filling in a blank. That's what they say. So we have to make certain that we are checking in boxes, right? Checking all the boxes that we need to apply or the items that we need and want to apply and filling in the blanks. Even if you're going to go with the default, you need to fill the blank in. That is called reasonable skill and care. That's what attorneys look at. Whenever an attorney has a client come to them and for real estate and they're reviewing the contract, the first thing they look at is, did that broker handle the paperwork with reasonable skill and care by filling in the blanks? If everything is just left blank and all just defaults, what do you think that is the first thing the attorneys will say?
Nobody didn't do a very good job.
Yeah, this broker did not do a good job. They didn't fill in the blanks. So remember to do that always. So filling in the first blank, and remember when the first thing I read about this whole forms manual, they said this is optional. Realistically, it's not optional. Amit, you want to read number 1 here?
Sorry, my son was stayed home. He's like talking about. I apologize. Hold on 1 second.
Okay.
So square footage, lot size, and encroachments.
Yep.
The listing broker and the buyer broker make no representation concerning A, the lot size or the accuracy of the information provided by the seller, B, the square footage of the improvements on the property, C, whether there are any encroachments, including fences, rockeries, buildings on the property or the property on adjacent properties. Buyer is advised to verify lot size, square footage, and encroachments to buyer's own satisfaction.
So what do you guys think? Are we going to mark this box every single deal we write?
Yep.
Yeah. That's why this form needs to be in every deal. So you are absolutely going to be marking this first box. So let's go up to number 6. Okay. This paragraph advises buyer to verify lot size, square footage, and the existence of any encroachments to buyer satisfaction. This paragraph also makes clear that listing broker and buyer broker make no representations concerning those items. I get a lot of people who kind of argue and say, Eric, I still don't need this form because I'm good enough just with Form 21 because the buyer can verify their information, right, during their information period, right? This is good enough, right? This protects them enough.
No.
Not really. I mean, this helps.
Yeah.
You got to stat. It's the shields, right? How many shields of protection can you get in front of you and us in the firm, right? We need to do that. All right, number 7. Let's see. Gavin, can you read 7? If you're not driving. Gavin. Rosa, can you read 7?
Title insurance, Northwest MLS. Purchase and sale agreements require seller to pay the premium for a homeowner's policy of title insurance for buyer. If a homeowner's policy is not available, then the purchase and sale agreements require seller to pay the premium for a standard policy. If buyer wants different coverage than the homeowner's policy, buyer and seller may agree in the optional clause addendum on either a standard policy, less coverage than a homeowner's policy, or an extended coverage policy, which is more coverage than a homeowner's policy. If the parties agree on an extended coverage policy, buyer will pay the increased cost of such a policy and will also likely be required to pay for a survey.
All right. So by default, our purchase and sale agreements automatically provide the title insurance. So in Form 21, it automates and says that the sellers, at seller's expense, they're going to apply for the current Alta form of homeowner's policy of title insurance for the 1 to 4 family residents from title insurance company. Okay. The buyer can end up asking, they can get a different policy if they want, but it's going to be at their cost. The Alta policy is the highest and best policy that, each company provides. If you want it to be less than that, you would mark this box. So what do you guys think? Do we want our buyers to have less than the better coverage?
No.
No way. Do you know how many contracts we still see come over that show that this box is marked? It's crazy. There's still a lot. Okay.
If that is checked, does title and escrow still do the Alta?
No.
They actually, yeah,
They
go off the
got to
contract.
follow the contract. Because whose choice is this?
The buyer's choice. No,
It's the buyer's choice.
Part of the contract, I guess.
Yeah, it's buyer's choice. So
Would there ever be an instant that the buyer would want to? I mean, so this whole line 2 doesn't make sense. Like, if the seller is providing it, why would anyone ever opt to, to hurting themselves?
yeah, it's just honestly, it's knowledge. It's the form's knowledge. I mean, the buyer brokers are writing these deals. They just they read this and go, oh, I want the standard. I don't want the buyer to have to pay for a survey. Although, does it even say that right here? So look at the extended. So seller authorizes buyer's lender or closing agent at seller's expense to apply for an Alta or comparable extended coverage policy of title insurance rather than the homeowner's policy of title insurance. Buyer shall pay the increased costs associated with the extended coverage policy, including the excess premium over that charge for homeowner's policy of title insurance and the cost of, any survey required by the title insurer. So it does say that, they would. How much are surveys these days, guys? You're talking at least $3,000.
So I imagine the only time that this would be used is like maybe it's a foreclosure in a bank is required.
Oh, for standard?
Yeah,
Yeah, you might see ones where they'll default to the standard.
yeah.
That and they want a bargain and sale deed and all that other stuff if
Because
you're
the
buying a
seller doesn't wanna
foreclosure.
pay it or-
Yeah,
Yeah,
they don't want to pay it.
Yeah.
Well, there's even ones where the foreclosure's like, you're paying for the whole policy.
Mhm.
Like the seller's not gonna even do it.
I usually include the title contingency on mine.
The 22T?
Yeah, just to make sure that, just one more layer to make sure that the Ulta comes in and that's good, right? Is that smart or what do you think?
Yeah, I'm good with that. If you don't have, the only time you like really want to use the 22T is if there's no preliminary title uploaded, so you can't review it.
Okay.
If there's nothing there, you have no idea.
Well, the preliminary doesn't have a lot of stuff on it though. Wouldn't you want to see, like, because when
It's-
when they upgrade it to the full policy, you get
Oh.
all kinds of stuff.
Oh,
It
of
isn't,
course.
would that be used for the title contingency to
Well,
make sure that,
preliminary title report will show enough,
okay,
I think, for you to get the
so
idea.
it's not necessary.
If it's in a community, it's a regular, if you're on a bunch of vacant land and stuff like that, keep the 22T in there,
Okay.
definitely.
May I ask a
Yeah.
question?
Yeah.
So at my last brokerage, they told me like the 22T it's something that as a buyer we should avoid unless we're waiving things and we just want an additional 5-day grace period to try to pull out for something, That's the only time as a buyer we should add the 22T in because this is something that the seller needs to provide, that they're providing the insurance, they're showing that they're having a marketable and equitable title. You know what I mean? Like that's their job to do. So we're helping basically the seller. So we just need it as a escape in case we're wait. You know what I mean? Would that be a true statement then?
That's not really true. We got 22T coming up, you guys, we're in the 22s right now, so we'll be coming to that form soon. But you're gonna see that that's not an automatic out. You don't get a 5-day out. The only time you get a 5-day out is if the seller can't cure any clouds on title.
Well, I guess if you were to use a 22T, it'd be like, they just have the exhibit A or something up there. That's the only thing, and you're like,
Oh, yeah. 100%. I want you guys to use the 22T when there is no preliminary title.
Yeah.
You got no policy, you got no title order number, you got no
Cause you still,
title company, you can't call.
cause you still see a ton of them, just.
Oh, yeah,
Just.
all the
exhibit A
freaking
up there.
time.
That's it. The only thing.
all the time.
Okay.
Yeah, if that's not uploaded as a listing broker, that's lazy.
But if
You're
there is,
lazy.
but if there's there, don't just have it in just to have it in. They're preliminary.
Yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
good to know.
All right, so got the difference in there. Number 8, seller cleaning. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Who wants to read 8? Who haven't I called on in there? Oops, am I in there? Nope, I just clicked to the wrong one. There you go.
I can read it.
So- Gavin, you got that this time? All right.
Seller cleaning.
Yep.
This paragraph requires seller to clean the interiors of the property and remove all trash, debris, and rubbish prior to buyer taking possession.
I love this section. You guys are gonna love this. All right. What is clean? Huh?
Everyone's definition of clean is different.
100% clean.
Wife's. clean is-
To rid of dirt, impurities, or extraneous matter. Clean a wound. To rid of corruption. Get rid of dirt. Okay, well, there's no dirt in the home.
You
This
get,
is
I remember talking about this before. It's like a reasonable, something that would be reasonably agreeable to be clean.
Yeah,
Therein lies the problem.
that's it. That's
Yeah,
the
that's
whole.
that's the problem.
You guys are, every one of you are gonna deal with this. Okay? You're going to deal with this. You pretty much can expect things to be like broom swept. I mean, it kind of, and you can expect nothing done. Pretty much everyone's definition of what they believe clean is going to be different, and it's going to be interpreted their way. If you do not have a conversation with your clients before getting possession of that property, it's gonna fall on you. Because what do buyers expect on the closing day?
They expect like pristine, like
Yeah,
they might.
guaranteed they're
Wanna set that
gonna think
expectation.
like, oh, the sellers have to hire professional cleaners, right?
No. So would you recommend like during the final walkthrough, you take them and like confirm with the seller, like, hey, has it been cleaned yet, or has it not been cleaned yet? Or
Are you going to clean it?
Are you gonna clean it? Yeah, you need to have conversations like what are the sellers going to do to clean? I think that
Right.
like you literally have to ask that to find out what will be done. Some buyer brokers literally have a cleaning company come and clean like 2 days before the buyer gets possession and stuff like they work it out with the seller to if they can do this. It just depends, but you guys have to have the conversation. If you don't, you're gonna end up with egg on your face. It's gonna be your fault. Buyers are gonna be absolutely upset. We've had complaints. Literally, I've had complaints here even, like, I don't understand. The sellers left garbage in the garbage can and they didn't dust the blinds. They didn't clean the windows. They didn't, what was the one? Oh, there was cobwebs on the fans.
And especially if you have someone that's coming from a renting situation,
Oh,
because that's how they have to leave the rental when they leave. So they expect that to be the same thing when they move into it. But that's.
yeah, they'll get docked money if it's
Yeah.
not
Comes off their
perfectly
deposit.
done.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, you can tell, like, I try and think about too, like, what is the condition of the house when we're showing it?
Yeah.
Right? Because if it's like moderate condition, it's not gonna be great.
You're
It's
gonna,
not gonna be.
you're skipping ahead. You're skipping ahead, Josh. Exactly. Like, this is the thing. What is the condition like when you go to the property? Okay, look at it closely. You can pretty much expect the same.
Or a little worse.
Or a little worse, yeah, when they were moving out. Now, we actually had a complaint where one of ours, the home was, now look at this. The home was vacant. No one was living in it. Okay, when it was shown, the whole time. There was, some debris, garbage, like trashy stuff left in the garage. There was stuff in the backyard. Right? And it wasn't like really super bad, but there was some there, right? It was our listing. Buyer broker called, they didn't do their walkthrough, which is definitely bad, which you guys all know after doing Form 21, when we went through that in depth about you have to do your 5-day prior to closing walkthrough. So they didn't even do their walkthrough. So their buyer was super mad. Like they did not even clean. So let's read the box again. Seller shall clean the where? Interiors of any structures and remove all trash, debris, and rubbish from the property prior to taking possession. So our broker's like, the seller's not doing it, he's gone. Like he's gone. He's out of the country. He's moved on. No one's here. No one's gonna be taking away the trash. Like you guys are buying it as is. And the deal's closed already. So realistically, if you would have had a problem, like, why didn't you do your walkthrough? You could have asked them.
And it'll depend on your buyer too, like what.
Oh,
they're-
yeah.
I had one last year that was an estate sale and there was all this stuff there
Oh,
and they were out of country.
yeah.
And then, when we did our walkthrough, all that stuff was still there. So I was like, they're trying to remove it. It closed, but all the stuff there. And when my buyers took possession, they're like, this is great. We have a light riding lawnmower. So I was like, oh gosh, I'm so sorry. Well, if you need help, I can take stuff to the dump for you or whatever.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, this is great. All this cool stuff that we got. And I was like,
Yeah.
it depends on the client. Another client might be like, hey, this is awful.
Yeah.
So it really depends on who you're.
That's
with.
That's why it's so critical for you to do the walkthrough enough time before closing to get things figured out, right? If you show up on the day before closing, you got no time to remedy any of these types of situations. That's why it's a good idea to do it about that, 3 or 4 days before, at least. Because that way you're like, okay, hey, we went to the house. There's still trash here. They haven't cleaned. I mean, there's still garbage. The tires are left in the backyard. All the old paint we asked to be removed is still here. It looks like they're kind of moved out. What's going on? Okay, can we make sure this is done? The buyers do not want it here. You're just gonna have to handle it that way. All right, personal property. Number 9. This paragraph requires seller to remove all personal property not later than the possession date. The paragraph makes clear that all items left by seller become the property of buyer. Okay, so if they do not take it, it does become the buyer's possession. We've had a ton of different instances with issues. If clients are going to have personal property still at the property, and they can't get it done before closing and remove it, come talk to us. Because we've had, oh man, one of our brokers got in huge trouble and it ended up costing them over $3,000 for this issue. This is the situation. There was a greenhouse in the backyard. The buyer came in, they said, yeah, we don't want that greenhouse. It was it had green on it still. It needs to be pressure washed and cleaned off. It had that kind of stain on it and right. It just looked bad. It just needed to be cleaned. They're like, yeah, we don't want it. Because at first the sellers were trying to sell it and the buyer's like, yeah, I'm not paying for that. Just get rid of it. So they kind of said in the contract said, it said greenhouse backyard will not be included in the sale. So they had it in the contract that way. Okay. All of a sudden, it's 2 days before closing. They go do their walkthrough and they're like, yeah, the greenhouse is still here. Are you guys going to come get it? And the seller was like, oh, I can't, someone who was going to take it now backed out. And so now what do we do? So our listing broker said, oh, I got an idea. I'll put it on Craigslist for you. Or offer up. And he put it all over the stuff. And someone's like, yeah, we'll come get it. So they said, we'll be here tomorrow. So now it's the day of closing. Day of closing. Yep, we'll be here tomorrow. Okay, great. So they said, yeah, we'll be there. The only way to get the greenhouse will be on the left side of the yard since it's got a wider kind of gate. That'd be the only way to get it through. Okay. So they said, perfect. No one's living in the house. You guys, the gate's going to be open. You can go grab it. Perfect. Guess what? They didn't show up on closing. Buyers closed on the closing date. All of a sudden, the next day, they moved in. And all of a sudden, the following morning, so 2 days later, after that, they heard something back up. And they're like, what was that? I don't know. They didn't hear it. It was early in the morning. All of a sudden, they heard something ruckus going on in their backyard. And they hear something crashing and they're like, what the hell? They wake up and they find this huge flatbed truck backed up over their curb into the front yard, squashed the grass because it was wet, and totally ruined the front yard. They knocked over their fence and then they lifted and hoisted the greenhouse, put it on the truck bed. And they're like, what the hell are you guys doing? They're like, oh, we bought the greenhouse. The seller sold it to us. And they're like, you can't do this. They're like, we're calling the police. And so they're like, hey, we're out of here. Hey, look, they paid us. We're leaving. So they left, ruined it. Who do you think got stuck with the bill with that? Listing broker.
Fire broker.
Listing broker. The listing broker, because they're the one who helped out, put it on the freaking, Craigslist. So, oh, actually, you know what? It was more than that. They said, we want a new greenhouse, new landscaping, new fence, new gate. And our broker, they got sued. He got sued. So this is the type of stuff you get in those situations where like you're trying to be the helper. You can't do anything after closing. It must be done before. So personal property stuff, if you're going to agree to things being removed, it's got to be done before closing. It's got to be in the contract. You got to know who's doing what, and you got to make sure that it's not going to damage the property. So
I had one where the seller was out of the country,
Mhm.
property sold, their car was in the side of the house.
Yep.
They came like 4 or 5 days later and removed it. Should you,
after closing,
it was after closing because they weren't even home. How would you put that in the contract if the car obviously doesn't, it's on the property, but it's not gonna belong to the new buyers.
it's got to be in the contract very clearly of not included items.
Car parking.
And you're gonna have to put like actual language, for clarification purposes. The 1990 Dodge Dart, whatever the car, is license plate number,
Yeah.
VIN number,
There's no problem.
Right?
There's no problem with this. They brought it out, but.
shall be removed
up to-
by this date. In the event any damage, to the property.
Yeah.
Seller shall pay you really got to describe what will happen, what is being removed, when, and who is responsible if there's any damage after closing.
Even just a car.
Anything,
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
Good to file that one.
Yeah. Utilities, check the box to indicate if seller is representing that property is connected to the described utilities, insert any applicable information, example, well, type, cable provider, internet provider, etc. Make sure it's accurate. If it's not, correct that. You're the listing broker, you received this, right? They marked public sewer. It's on septic. Or vice versa. You better strike that one, get initials, or change it in your Form 36 only. Don't make the changes on any of the contract. So just make certain that you guys that it's accurate, whatever it is.
But you should probably match that up to your 22K too, right?
Yeah.
Thing.
Yep. Look at the listing, buyer brokers, look at the listing input, pull up 22K, make sure that it says what it is. Number 6 is insulation, new construction. If it's new construction, then this must be filled in. Okay. If it's not new construction, you're never marking 6. Most of the time, new construction has their own either purchase and sale agreements completely, and this is always disclosed in there by law. It's already in there. Or if it's a newly built home and they have their own builder's addendum, this is always in there. If it's not in there, it has to be in the deal. It must be disclosed. Number 7, leased property, very important. Number 12. Let's see. Jason, you want to read this one? I'll grab some water.
Property review period and assumptions. Use this clause if seller leases personal property that will be passed to buyer on closing. Fill in the number of days that seller has to provide the leases to buyer, and also fill in the number of days that buyer has to review the lease agreement. Note that the burden is on buyer to give the notice of disapproval within the prescribed time period if buyer does not approve the leases and elects to terminate the transaction. If buyer does not timely terminate the agreement, buyer waives the contingency and agrees to assume the applicable leases.
All right, so how are you gonna know if something's leased? Zoom people? How do you
Won't they
know?
have that listed
Ask
in
the
the
seller.
sometimes the Form 17 and disclosure typically?
Yep, so Form 17 will be in there, so you need to review that. And also inside the listing, will state, hopefully is in there. Really, really good listing brokers will pull any documentation from the seller for those leased items, and they'll upload them right in the supplements. That I see that very, very rarely, but really, really good listing brokers would get that type of thing and have that in there. I've even seen some of those listing brokers actually have 22D filled in, already in there and included and uploaded in the supplements and said, any, buyer brokers submitting offers, please use 22D attached.
Kind
So-
of a pro tip is if you notice, those panels, the solar panels on the roof.
Oh,
And there's
yeah.
nothing listed on about leasing
Yeah.
property, double check to make sure that those aren't leased, because a lot of those are on the lease.
Yeah, they got
solar
those leased. Another one,
Water
that's,
tanks.
yeah,
Old school.
old school hot water tanks could be, which is really weird, but they're in there. But the one that's probably you'll see that's pretty common is your propane tanks. A lot of people don't want to spend that kind of money, buy their own tank. They'll lease them. So that happens a lot too. Old school alarm systems used to be leased, so very, very rarely do you see that now. But gotta find out, right? I mean, if anything's leased, buyer might have to assume those leases. All right, number 13. Homeowner association review period. Use this clause if the property is subject to a homeowner association and buyer wants to review the documents listed in Form 22D as a condition to purchasing the property. Fill in the number of days that seller has to provide documents listed in this paragraph, if available. This is very key words here, if available. And also fill in the number of days that buyer has to review the documents. Note that the burden is on the buyer to give the notice of disapproval within the prescribed time of period. If buyer does not approve the documents and elects to terminate the transaction, otherwise the homeowners association review contingency will waive automatically and buyer will no longer have the right to terminate the contract on this basis. There's a lot of items in this section. A through E are the items that the buyer can get if they are available. The association rules and regulations, including but not limited to architectural guidelines, association bylaws and covenants, conditions and restrictions, otherwise known as CCNRs, association meeting minutes from the prior 2 years. This was a hard one. Some HOAs don't keep them long enough. Association board of directors meeting minutes from the prior 6 months, and association financial statements for the prior 2 years and current operating budget. So buyer would have 5 business days to actually review those documents and approve them. So this is a good one, for a good contingency. If the buyer has a boat or a work truck they want to park in their yard, or a boat, an RV, and it's very important for them to have that on that property, you absolutely probably need to have this contingency in place to have the time to verify they will be able to park those items or have those items on their property. Some HOAs don't allow them. I had even one of my own clients bought this home specifically for their RV. It had an RV slab, hookups and everything on the property behind the fence, and they loved it. They're like, this is amazing, perfect. Guess what? That HOA all of a sudden years later, after they moved in, decided to vote and terminate that from the community. So the next thing you know, they get this notice that says, hey, you need to move your RV. It's been at the property past the 10-day period. And they're like, what are you talking about? They're like, oh yeah, we passed this new rule to the community that you can only have your RV at the property for 10 days. That's it. They're like, what the hell? Reason we bought this house for this. So they hired an attorney. Attorney said, looked at it and said, your HOA, they voted it. They changed it. There's nothing you can do.
It's this,
Yeah.
it's this.
When you bought it, it wasn't there, but they voted it in. Stuff like that is bad, right? I mean, that's the thing that it hurts people. The only way to know if those are already existing in there is if you would get this review to verify it's not there. Even if it's not there, sometimes those can actually come into play. There's really nothing you can do.
So some of these HOAs, they say there's an HOA in place, but it's not being recognized. I would imagine still check this box and you can't, so it's your kind of get out of jail free card, right? So
It is. This is one of those ones that you could get out of jail free if you have this in place, because you can terminate it. Yeah, you can terminate the deal based on, verifying those things. HOA's association transfer fee. If there is a transfer fee imposed by the HOA, the move-in or move-out fee, the fee shall be paid by the party as provided in the association documents. The association documents do not provide which party pays the fee shall be paid by buyer or seller if not filled in. If you do not mark this checkbox on number 9, and the HOA doc says it's going to be paid by the buyer, but if it's not filled in, who's got to pay for it? What do you think?
that's the seller, but I guess you have to negotiate it.
In that
Isn't it
situation,
typically the buyer?
yeah, it's normally the buyer in the HOA docs. A lot of times they'll be paying a move in, and seller is going to pay a fee too when they move out. That's just what happens in a lot of buildings, because they have to put up padding in the elevators. They got to reserve elevators. They got to do all these things. So if, that's probably going to happen, but as long as you mark this box and you mark this box, then the seller's going to have to pay the fee for the buyer to move in too.
Well, it's always when you're representing the buyer, you want the seller to pay for things.
Right.
When you're representing the seller, you always want the buyer to represent things. So it's like, kind of, however you can negotiate it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. All right. Excluded items. We kind of beat this one already, right? About if the following items that would otherwise be included in the sale of the property, it is excluded from the sale. Excluded items, seller shall repair any damage to the property caused by the removal of the excluded items, and then the excluded items. So what are the excluded items, right? So in this box, you would fill this in. It's always good, listing brokers, get with your seller if they're like, oh, I can't include this family heirloom. It's a chandelier, we've had this everywhere we've gone. Have the seller remove it. Have them remove it before you list the property go live, and replace it with something or whatever it's going to be. I'm telling you, if you don't do this, you're going to run into issues. It comes down to that same old thing of just like the cleaning, right?
Well, especially with the first impression, there's this beautiful front door. And when they're showing, and when they move in, it's builder grade.
Right. Oh, that guaranteed that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
We had this situation. It was a really nice chandelier, and they said, yep, it's not going to be included in the sale. Great. They move in and they replace this beautiful chandelier with one of those domes, the generic dome. And they're like, they were pissed. The buyers did their walkthrough and like, this is ridiculous. Are you serious? Contractually, did the seller is there anything they did wrong?
Remove it, remove, right?
Right. You're gonna have issues, people, if you do not get it done before you list it.
like, landscaping.
Yeah, you're ahead of right where I was gonna go. I had my own clients did this. Had the perfect deal come through, literally, full price, closing exactly where the way they wanted. They're even gonna have delayed possession to give them time to move. It was perfect. All of a sudden, they call the listing or the buyer brokers called me and goes, Eric, what's going on? Buyers drove by to show their friends. Your sellers were in the front and backyard. They're digging up plants and trees. They're removing them. What the hell's going on? And I'm like, I have no idea. When I asked, the sellers, were there any items that they plan to remove before we listed, explained this whole thing to them before. And they, oh, no, we're including everything. They're like, so I call them, they say, oh yeah, Eric, we're removing all the bulbs and everything. We don't want to, to die. We want to take some of these. We're like, you can't. It's included in the sale unless it was in a pot. And so the buyers are like, we're out. They just terminated, sent the 35R just immediately. Didn't even do the inspection. They just like, we're out. Like, what else are they going to do if they're pulling this type of thing? We don't want to deal with this. And my listing, the sellers were like, can they do this? I'm like, yeah, 100%. So if it's going to be excluded, get it taken care of. Home warranty. All right, number 16. Gavin, you want to read 16? Gavin? Paging Gavin. Amit, you want to do 16?
Use this clause for buyer to obtain a 1-year home warranty. Generally, a home warranty is a contract that covers the major systems and appliances in the property, including failures due to normal wear and tear. The parties need to decide if the seller will pay any amount at closing for the home warranty and what options, if any, will be included. There is also an option in the form for the specifics related to the home warranty that the parties may want to include.
Yep. So if you're going to do this, it needs to be in the deal. Who will be the warranty provider? How much will it be? Or maybe sometimes buyer brokers just say, buyer broker to pay for home warranty. Sometimes they do that.
I have one where the seller was giving them a big credit, and then the buyer was going to pay for it. The buyer's broker was going to pay for this, and so it was listed that they were going to pay for it, but they had to remove it because there was so much, because the lender
Credits.
Yeah, the lender wouldn't allow it because, so just kind of maybe keep that in mind.
Yeah. Cap on credits, stuff like that. Buyer broker's paying it, not a problem, but yeah, you're right. This is a seller credit. When it comes to escalation clauses, I think it mentions in there if the seller's paying for anything like a home warranty, that's a credit. You have to include that in your calculations too.
And it could blow up maybe what you were giving them is like
totally. Yep. So just be mindful of that, checking with the lender, what's the cap on their credits, where are they at? Is this going to put them over? All right, numbers 12 here is an other. This is our mini Form 34. Okay, you can use this space to include other special clauses. It's perfect for you to put those little things in there. If you can fit it on that rather than adding a Form 34 to your deal, always use this space to do that. And then of course, initials and dates. Buyers and sellers should initial and date the addendum. Each person initialed, not the date on the purchase and sale agreement, but the date in which they're actually signing or initialing. All right, time to jump over to 22E FIRPTA. Reason for use, under the Foreign Investment and Real Property Tax Act, FIRPTA, Section 1445 of the U.S. Internal Revenue Code, the disposition of a U.S. real property interest by a foreign person is subject to income tax withholding. Buyer is responsible for finding out if seller is a foreign person for the purposes of US income taxation. And if buyer fails to do so, buyer could be held liable for the tax. Use. In every transaction, this form or an equivalent form should be completed by seller and provided to the closing agent. General term J on Form 21, seller citizenship and FIRPTA of the purchase and sale agreement provides in relevant part. Seller shall execute a certification, MLS Form 22E or equivalent, under the Foreign Investment in Real Property Tax Act at closing and provide the certification to the closing agent. If the seller is a foreign person for purposes of US income taxation, and this transaction is not otherwise exempt from FIRPTA, closing agent is instructed to withhold and pay the required amount to the IRS. So in Form 21, you've got number 14 here, seller citizenship, FIRPTA, seller is or seller is not a foreign person. Buyer brokers, you're writing up your deal. How do you know which box to mark?
When you look at the FIRPTA form of 22E, right? Like it's checked, and then you know from.
Hopefully in the supplements is the Form 22E and it's filled out already. If it's not in there, buyer brokers, how are you filling this in?
I don't fill it in. I'll tell them if they can counter if they're not going to be able to get it to me.
Right, perfect. So we got to dive into this because you're partly right and you're partly wrong. So if 22E is not uploaded in the supplements, and then shame on you, listing brokers, if that's not in there, if you're because who has to fill in the 22E? How many, is it required in how many sale in the deal? Or how many, I'm saying it wrong now.
It is required with the listing, right? Because they need it for when they go to closing for tax purposes.
Every transaction. So who's exempt? Nobody. No one is exempt. No deal is exempt from this, having this form. We've had plenty of brokers who literally did not have this. They had number 14 on Form 21 marked, that seller was not, but there's no 22E. Can the firm pay out commissions or compensation? Wow, I used the old word there.
No.
No, we can't pay this out until we have this because it's required in every transaction. Every year I get our own brokers like, hey, I haven't got paid yet on my deal. I'm like, okay, well, let's look what's going on. Look at SkySlope. Oh, I see notes here that you're missing FIRPTA. Oh, but if we marked it, it's on the front page. It's not good enough. This form is required in every single transaction we do. If it's not uploaded in the supplements, Amit, you're absolutely right. You can't mark this. This is a disclosure. So now we need to read why. Going, keep going. There we go. Seller warrants that the identification of seller's citizenship status for the purpose of US income taxation in specific term number 14 is correct. Seller shall execute a certification, MLS Form 22E or equivalent, under the Foreign Investment Rural Property Tax Act, and provide the certification to the closing agent within 10 days of mutual acceptance. If seller is a foreign person for purposes of US income taxation, and this transaction is not otherwise exempt from FIRPTA, closing agent is instructed to withhold and pay the required amount to the IRS. Seller shall pay any fees incurred by buyer related to such withholding and payment. If seller fails to provide FIRPTA certification to the closing agent within 3 days of the mutual acceptance, buyer may give notice that buyer may terminate the agreement at any time 3 days thereafter the right to terminate notice. If seller has not either provided the FIRPTA certification to the closing agent, buyer may give notice of termination of this agreement the termination notice anytime following 3 days after delivery of the right to the termination notice. If buyer gives the termination notice, before seller provides the FIRPTA certification to the closing agent, this agreement is terminated and earnest money shall be refunded to buyer. Where is the, oh, you know what? It might not even say it in the actual form. It must actually say it in the manual then. So let's go to the manual 21. Out of the box. All right. So let's get to, oops, 14. Oh, not that one. This 14 would be 21. Okay, I need. Okay. Crazy that we have to do this. It didn't say it in the part where we read it, but this is what it says. And a lot of brokers get this wrong. So this is where we got to kind of read here. So please note that when buyer is writing the offer, buyer likely will not know if seller is or is not a foreign person for the purposes of U.S. income taxation. Accordingly, buyer may leave this term blank to allow seller to make the appropriate selection. General term R states that, just like the insertion of seller's name, seller's selection of citizenship status is not considered a counteroffer. So right there,
So put it in your offer.
so put it in the offer, like if
Don't chase it down.
Yeah.
You have to chase it.
you definitely FIRPTA should be in there. So it actually does say it in R, right? Seller's name, seller's warranty of citizenship status. So it is in R, but it's actually not in the FIRPTA section. So it can be kind of confusing, right? That if you didn't know that, some people would actually make a strike and counter that.
So you could just leave it blank.
So you leave it blank. And you're fine. The seller can mark this, right? And that is not a counter. You do not need, you would actually but have mutual acceptance, in the event it came back and it's not initialed.
And since you had it in your contract, the 3 days rule, so they'd have to answer that within 3
Yes.
days, or you could get your earnest money back.
Yep. So if they didn't answer it in 3 days, then you can basically say, hey, we're terminating. You didn't fill this in. We need this. And they need the form. Another question for you guys. Does 22E the 22E FIRPTA belong on 22, or excuse me, on Form 21, line 18, on the addenda line or the catalog?
Only if they're not resident, right? If they're not,
What do you, it's a yes or no? What do you think?
no.
No. Gavin? Rosa? Anybody else on Zoom?
Yes, if it's included with the contract, because in our buyer has to sign it, right? Because they're acknowledging. The only time we have to sign it as a buy side is if they're not.
So
And so,
this is yes.
I mean, if there
seller.
is a foreign person.
So let me scroll down. The forms are in order of what can go in the addenda line. Do you see 22E?
No.
Nope, they don't list it because what is 22E? It's a disclosure form. This is a disclosure. It's not even an addendum. So it does not belong on the addenda line. Do you put Form 17 on the addenda line?
No.
No. You know how many times we see this? You know how many times I've seen this? Absolutely never should any of those items be listed on the addenda line for the catalog.
And your Form
If
17 should never be in your offer. It should be a separate PDF.
Yeah, it
You
should
you
be.
want part of your offer.
It should be. First and foremost, now people who've been in the business for a long time, they still try to do this. We used to have to do this, but it's been more than a decade that they've actually put this right here. It's been very important. They've even changed the rules in the Northwest MLS. If you don't, listing brokers, if you don't have Exhibit A legal description uploaded right in the supplements of your listing, right when that listing goes live, what happens to you? You get an auto fine. They fine you.
$50.
Yep, $50 fine automatically if you don't have this uploaded. I see those notifications still from even our own firm, which is sad. Exhibit A does not need to be listed anymore. We don't have to write that in. Form 17 is also a disclosure. If you're a listing broker and you see Form 17 listed in this addenda line, you immediately need to get that removed. That is one that needs to be stricken and initialed. Because it needs to be very, very clear that your seller's disclosures are not going to be a part of this agreement. If that happened, it could be very detrimental to the seller. You're talking, they mess up on that disclosure in any way. Now, according to attorneys, you pretty much can probably sue for even election of remedies against the seller because they made those disclosures a part of the agreement. So that's very, very dangerous. Do not allow that, listing brokers. Yeah, do not have Form 17 listed. And then the same thing, FIRPTA, it's a disclosure. Now, you're a listing broker, you receive this contract, and you're like, oh, this is perfect. We need to sign this around. It's perfect. I don't want to do anything. The only thing that they did wrong, they listed FIRPTA right here. I'm okay with you guys signing this deal around. Don't worry about that. I don't, if you're gonna be countering and changing other stuff anyway, then go ahead and just, you can either strike it. It needs no initials because this is the catalog. This is the, you don't need to do initials in this section unless it's some sort of a major clarity thing you have to do, okay? So every transaction gets FIRPTA. Seller must go ahead and do that. They must fill out the form. Note that the first box in 22E, which is always used, is for the seller to fill in. Okay. So seller would have to fill this in, right? It's either yes, they are, or no, they're not. If they're not, or if they are, then they need to understand there's going to be more taxes withheld. Depending, now who can tell them how much the taxes that are going to be withheld?
Tax professional or a CPA.
Yep. CPA or a tax professional is the only one. We can't tell them.
Title and escrow might tell them that they would.
Title and escrow can direct them, give them ideas, whatever, but
Have you stay in our.
yep. Stay in your lane. Don't be doing that. You're not an accountant, nor have you ever played one on TV. Do not try this, okay? Tax ID number or social security number, do not fill this in. We don't want to fill this in. That can be done at escrow. So go ahead and leave that blank. Address, my home address is, so where is the seller going to be living? If they're currently in the home they're selling, this is the same address. Okay. And then this is for the seller to sign. Now, right here, it says on the form, buyer certification. It's only applicable if seller is a non-resident alien. So if they mark the I am here, Form 21 would absolutely also be marked. Scroll way back. Oh, going the wrong way. My bad. Actually, I can close the manual. Just go right here. So 14, if they are, right, are on FIRPTA, that means yes, is on the 21. They are a foreign person. Okay. So in the event they are, that means your buyer will be signing this form. They will sign this form no matter what. The next step will be determining, is the amount realized under 300 grand and a family residence? If that's true, they'll be marking this box. Buyer. Now, if the amount realized is more than 300, but it's not going to exceed $1 million, and it's a family residence for 10% tax, then they would mark this box. If it's over $1 million, which box are you guys marking? Come on, Zoom people. Zooms. We got 4 of you on there.
Neither.
So,
I don't know. I'm taking a guess.
yeah, neither. If it's over $1 million, you can't mark this box. You can't do either one of these, but the buyer still has to sign the form acknowledging that the seller is a foreign person. That's the same. They're saying, I am a foreign person, right?
I've never had one.
You haven't? No.
Yeah,
We see a few of them every year.
Yeah, but
Every single year we see a few of them.
Canadians.
Canadian, Chinese,
Yeah.
we've seen, and
Green card programs.
yeah, it just,
Microsoft, you have.
Yep.
Blue Origin.
India, actually someone, yeah, who's in India. But most of the time most of the time they get the proper steps done to where they are paying taxes. They kind of like are here,
They probably.
in the right way. Yeah, so they know, and that's handled by them. Okay. All right. Any last questions? I know that was a lot of stuff to cover today. Hopefully that gave you a lot more clarity, obviously in the 22D optional clauses. That form has got to be in every single deal. And then listing brokers, making sure you get FIRPTA every single time. And then buyer brokers, making sure that the FIRPTA form is in the deal. You've got to have it. We can't pay you unless you've got that in the deal. So thank you guys for making it today. And we will see you on the next one. Take care.
Thank you. See you tomorrow.
Tomorrow.